Hi, everybody. Mary here. I'm broadcasting today from this kind of little hold-up space because we are in the middle of a heat wave, and in the middle of fires. There's smoke due to some lightning storms, some unprecedented lightning storms we had a couple of days ago here in the area, and of course, there's the pandemic. It's like absolutely. Apocalyptic in the air. And on top of all of that, which I know is something that many people are experiencing, the continuing uncertainty of just what's happening geopolitically, and environmentally, right? But also, in my case, there's an added little bit that if you've been following me for a little bit, you might know about, but I haven't really formally announced here yet, and that is that I'm pregnant, and I'm almost 7 months pregnant. So I just want you to just kind of rewind back to what was happening in March of last year, and in my case, a couple of days into the shelter-in-place orders that were imposed locally, I found out that I was pregnant, which is not part of a plan, and certainly, especially at the time, did not seem like good timing. It was just really, really a surprise. And it wasn't until I found myself starting to think about things like, I watched the fear, run through me, and I could kind of notice some of the thoughts after a while of like, oh my gosh, I'm on my own. I got to figure this out. And yet sometimes I think there's nothing I can do, to make certain things feel more right than they were, just like this sense of separation, and sort of powerlessness. And when I noticed those themes come up, it reminded me back to something that Marshall used to talk about. And one of my mentors, if you follow Nikki Cashton, talks a lot about these domination cultures that are sort of characterized by scarcity, separation, and powerlessness. And that these are three themes that often come up in the people who live in them, especially when there's extra stress. So Mickey talks about it in the context also of patriarchy. She's a sociologist, and so this is something that she studies. And patriarchy not meaning anything having to do with men or women. Patriarchy in this case, in terms of just the sort of general academic definition of it, much more so about what kinds of power over structures are built into the systems in these places. So the way I think of it that kind of helps me to make it more tangible. When we're talking about patriarchy or power over, we're talking about the isms, so like racism, sexism, classism, some of those kinds of things are sort of the defining features. But these three characteristics tend to show up when you have the experience of living under these kinds of power over structures. And so I just really saw that show up in me, and I wanted to share with you the three antidotes to those, the three characteristics of a more liberated mindset, of a more liberated state, and then how we can start to plug into those. So where we start off with scarcity, the alternate is enoughness. Looking, and for me, enoughness shows up when I really pay attention to how things work in nature. The idea of not abundance necessarily, like you hear about in sort of these more new age spiritual, sort of law of attraction circles. Abundance sometimes can kind of bring about these ideas of, like waterfalls of gold or something like that. But this idea of enoughness, Lynn Twist in her book talks about just plenty to get through without necessarily this idea of all of this overflow. So, so scarcity, enoughness, separation, and togetherness. And I want to talk about, leaning into togetherness in a little bit, but the third is powerlessness versus choice. And so, in the context of, me realizing, oh my gosh, I'm going to have a baby, and there's this pandemic, and, even more recently, this thing isn't, at least where I live, going away anytime soon. And this is going to be a very different year in every way imaginable than what I would have expected, right? What I could have predicted. And so I remind myself of where there's enoughness. Oh my gosh, I actually have a lot of support. I have an amazing partner. I'm not by any means doing this by myself, even though somehow that's where my mind goes especially when I'm kind of in that stress response. Togetherness, that capacity to feel into who's with me and who else is going through some of the same things I'm going through. Like, the togetherness doesn't have to be in person. It's lovely when it is, when we have that sense of visceral togetherness, that is powerful. But if that's not possible, which of course right now for many of us is certainly not as accessible, then the kinds of togetherness practices can include, recognizing all the other people on the planet that are in the same boat as I'm in, just feeling into the togetherness, or in the places where there are disagreements, can we find togetherness in how we hold what we're going to do about navigating some of these policy decisions, or even in a household. I've had so many clients talking about, gosh, my husband and I disagree with our in-laws about what needs to be happening in our household to keep us safe, and so how do we come up with agreements? That's the question, like finding togetherness in the context of different opinions. And as much as anything else, this to me is very important in the context of a togetherness practice, and that is to actively work to humanize those that you have a tendency to dehumanize. So whoever becomes more two-dimensional in your mind, when you think about us versus them, whoever the them is. And it's so normal for our brains to, especially when we're scared, and especially when we feel kind of like the scarcity, separation, powerlessness, to look at them as threats and to start to see them based on different labels we might put on them, whether it has to do with what side of the aisle they're on, or whether it has to do with the way that, the various opinions that they hold, or there's a number of different labels that we put on people that starts to kind of disconnect us from their humanity, dehumanizes them. And so actively rehumanizing those that you've created a distance between, just imagining, they have the same needs I have. Wow, we were probably pretty similar when we were all 5-year-old little kids running around, just letting yourself in some way or another connect to togetherness, whether it's in the abstract or in the visceral, right? And the last piece about choice. So this is one of my favorite questions that is almost more like a mantra. It's a little bit more like seeding something into a dilemma, rather than it's not always about like looking for an actual answer right away. But the question is very simple, like, where can I find some choice? Where can I find some choice right now? What's something I can do? What's something that I can do to experience my efficacy? And so there's any number of things that might come up if you're really grappling with a lot of uncertainty and not knowing what's going to happen in a couple of months financially, or what it's going to be like to become a first-time parent, and so on. So many practices come to mind around this, connecting to choice. I mean, mourning practices are certainly important. Connection practices, anchoring into trust is something that is a very specific practice I work with almost all of my clients on at some point or another. Like how to experience that, how to find out where that is in here, and bring it to bear to the situation or to the general affect that you're experiencing. So, yeah, little baby is going to come in November 14th. I'm due, a little baby boy. And we don't have a name picked out for sure yet. We're kind of honing in. I think I have my favorite, but I'm going to hold off until we decide for certain before saying anything. And in the meantime, there's all of these questions about what will it be like to to deliver in this kind of a situation, like the actual medical policies in hospitals. If I end up going into the hospital is very different than it would otherwise be, right? I could go on and on, in terms of looking at how all of the things in front of me bring up so much uncertainty. And so that doesn't change. And the part of me that wishes I had control also doesn't change. That's like control is one of, we talk about strategy versus need in MVC. Control is one of the favorite strategies that we have for meeting the needs for safety and trust and power, right? And so I just acknowledge that that's in there and that I can tap into these things on my own as needed. Right? I can go there. I can go directly to the source of the needs themselves, and have a very different experience of navigating the uncertainty. I'm not quite at the space that maybe at some point I will be. In other journeys I have been, where the uncertainty is kind of exciting. There's like this anticipatory quality that I think is actually feasible in some cases. Where it's kind of like a holiday, or, there's a birthday gift and I don't know what's in it, but can't wait to find out. I have a feeling it's going to be good. I have a feeling I'm going to like it. Right. But in the meantime, looking towards, shifting scarcity, separation, powerlessness into enoughness, togetherness, and choice, so that I can feel grounded, so I can kind of keep just showing up, honoring the parts of me that are scared, and stay really anchored into a place that's more empowered. So what I'd love for you to do is leave a comment below about which of these, enoughness, togetherness, or choice. If there was one of those that you were going to focus on first, which would it be for you? Leave me a comment. Let me know. Thanks.